Alright, welcome. Screencast, the Battle of Issus, 333 BC. You remember from the last one, Darius assembling a huge army to meet Alexander. Alexander is as determined as Darius to meet him in battle, to defeat the great king, the lord of the world. That's what Alexander is in Asia for. Okay, Issus is a town, was and is, as you can see here. Alexander's victory in Granicus now controls most of Asia Minor, and victory against Darius here will secure him a good portion of the Persian Empire. And there's a little bit of unusual sort of maneuvering going on behind the scenes. So as we come down to the Gulf of Issus here, this is sort of the eastern Mediterranean Sea. Here's Alexander's army stationed here. And sorry the screen is obscuring it, but Darius's army is stationed at a place called Sochoi, Sochoi, here. And now Darius is on the plains, as you can see, all big plains here. These are mountains and the sea, obviously. And Darius has an army, according to Aaron, that's 600,000 strong. So he wants to meet Alexander on the plain, because that will allow his huge army simply to spread out and surround the much smaller Macedonian army. Fighting on the plain is a very wise idea as far as Darius is concerned. Alexander, he doesn't care. He just wants to find Darius. And so he heads north up the coast here, looking for Darius. He's heard he's on the other side of these mountains. Now, Darius is at Sochoi, but with 600,000 strong army, they can't actually stay there for too long, because disease will spread when you have that amount of humans encased, meshed together in a relatively small area. Disease will spread pretty quickly, and there's also supply in such a massive army. You can't just stay still. And so after 3 days of waiting for Alexander, who was heading north, Darius actually goes, so stuff it, I'm going to go and find Alexander. He's heard Alexander's on the other side of the mountains. And so Darius actually heads north through a pass here, looking for Alexander. Alexander heads up here. He doesn't yet know that Darius is on the move. He believes Darius is still over here. And Alexander gets to the town of Issus, and he leaves many of his wounded there at Issus. And then he carries on down the Gulf, this time heading south, looking for Darius. Understanding Darius on the far side of the mountains here. What Alexander wants to do is to head down south, go through this pass between the mountains, and he'll happily meet Darius here. Darius, on the other hand, is actually coming north and then south as he's looking for Alexander. And so perhaps at one stage, Darius went north, one night, Darius went north on this side of the mountains, and Alexander went south on this side of the mountains, and they're just like missing each other, both looking for a fight. That's not really happening. So Alexander is heading down the coast here, and you can see that it's very, very narrow between the mountains and the sea. Darius is behind him. Now, Darius actually comes to the town of Issus, where Alexander is left as wounded. At this point, Alexander is right down here, looking for the southern pass. Now, Darius finds Alexander's wounded, and he treats them rather harsh. He doesn't kill them. He just chops off their hands. They all lose their hands. They lose their hands, and it puts pitch, like tar, on the end of them to seal the bleeding. And he sends the Alexander's wounded to follow Alexander and go and tell him Darius is behind you. You need to find out, you need to fight. At this point, Alexander does hear from his scouts that Darius has indeed moved and has got behind him. And so Alexander comes through the pass and does a U-turn, turns back around, and he realizes he's actually been trapped. Darius has got behind him, and Alexander has to scamper back the way he has come to head north to face Darius, who's coming south. At one point here, the wounded that Darius chopped off their hands, they make their way down to Alexander, and they're showing what's happened. They're just like, no hands. Like, having no hands would be so difficult. How could you pull your pants up? That's one thing I was thinking of. And also, how could you clean yourself after you've been to the toilet? Like, how do you do that? Someone have to do it for you? I don't know. You need someone with hands. So they come down, they got no hands, like, excuse me, Alexander, look what he's done to us. So I always find it's quite funny. I shouldn't find it funny. It's not funny. Anyway, so Darius is coming down south, Alexander's coming north, and they're going to meet at this little river here. It's always convenient in these ancient battles that there's a river bisecting the two armies, I find. Now, in one sense, Alexander has been caught out because Darius has got behind him. In another sense, Darius has made a big mistake. He's left the plain where his large army would have probably surrounded Alexander and defeated them. He's left the plain, and he's now going to be having to fight in a narrow gorge, a narrow gap between the sea and the mountains, similar to Thermopylae. Well, not quite so narrow, but same thing. So Darius, yes, he's fooled Alexander, he's got behind him, but he is on a terrain where they're going to fight, which is far more advantageous to Alexander than Darius himself. Similar to Thermopylae, Darius's large numbers may well end up counting for nothing. Perhaps he should have stayed at Sokoi. So the armies are lined up, like as you see here. We've got the Gulf of the seas right here, and we've got the mountains here as well, lowlands, and then stemming up even higher. Yeah, that's what I leave that. Yeah, so the rivers between them, but you can see in this graphic how significantly larger the Persian army is. Now, Alexander apparently gave a famous speech before battle. This is from Arrian. He says, "Remember that already danger has threatened you men, and you have looked it in the face in triumph. This time the struggle will be between a victorious army and an enemy already once beaten. Our enemies are Persians, men who for centuries have lived soft and luxurious lives. We of Macedon for generations have been trained in the hard school of danger and war. Above all, we are free men, and they are slaves. There are Greek troops with the Persians, but how different is their cause from ours? They will be fighting for pay, and not much of it at that. We, however, shall fight for Greece. And what, finally, of the two men in supreme command? They have Darius, you, Alexander." And by all accounts, his men were hugely boosted morale at hearing this speech from their king. Now, Arrian puts this into Alexander's mouths, and perhaps he probably did make a speech before battle, before fighting his men, to his men, sorry. But it cannot be word for word. That would not be possible. But it probably captures the gist of any speech, if there was one, in Alexander's little high-pitched voice, I think, as well. Anyway, so we've got the battlefield lined up, and it's something like this. So here's the creek, the river that is bisecting the two armies. The sea's on Alexander's left, and the mountains are on his right. Alexander, sorry if my head's obscuring it, but Alexander, again, just like Granicus, placed himself on the right here with his companion cavalry. And then on the left is Parmenio with the allied cavalry, same as at Granicus. And in the center is the phalanx. That's exactly the same that we had at Granicus. On the other side, on the Persian side, Darius, like Memnon at Granicus, he's at the back here, center rear, best view. And he's surrounded by his immortals, the bodyguard. And Darius' center in front of him are the Greek phalanx. So these are the Greeks who are fighting with the Persians on Darius' side. So it's Greek on Greek here, which... oh, God. Anyway, and on the Persian left, we've got the infantry and a small detachment infantry on the Persian right, and their lead is their heavy cavalry here. Up in the mountains, up in the foothills, Darius actually sends some infantry and archers to try to outflank Alexander. So what he would have done at Sokoi is to try to outflank him anyway. So he puts the infantry up here, hoping to do that as well. Now, what Darius's plan is for these infantry archers in the foothills to fire their arrows and attack Alexander here, but he intends his heavy cavalry on the right to advance over the river and to crush Parmenio, to crush Alexander's left wing, and that will allow them to come around and surround Alexander. So that is the plan, and we'll see how that works out. Well, Alexander, first of all, he sees up here, video on the right, he sees the infantry and the archers, but the infantry are untrained troops, and they're protected by archers. And that's the dead giveaway, that the archers are there to protect the infantry. For many of the infantry, about 2,000 of them, I understand, it was their first taste of battle. And so they were very green, and they're going against Alexander. The archers fire their arrows, the infantry can't really follow up, and Alexander's companion cavalry are able to quickly move into the foothills and rout this outflanking movement by the Persians fairly comprehensively. But on Alexander's left, the Persian heavy cavalry have crossed over, and they are crushing Parmenio. They completely outnumber him. Now, Parmenio's job here, on the orders of Alexander, is simply to hold. He must hold the left wing. He's probably not going to defeat them. They will crush him. But he needs to hold long enough, hold the left flank long enough for Alexander to strike at Darius. That's the plan. So Parmenio has the the rough job, really. He needs to hold against this onslaught of Persian heavy cavalry. Okay, now the Darius sends his Greek phalanx in to cross the river and face the Macedonian phalanx, and so we have battle engaged across all three fronts here, across the fronts on 3 points. The heavy cavalry are crushing Parmenio, the Greeks are fighting Greeks here, and Alexander has taken care of the infantry archers here and is moving against the infantry. Now, this is the crucial stage in the battle. Alexander and his companion cavalry are far superior to the Persian infantry. Just like at Thermopylae, they're not totally trained soldiers. Alexander's Macedonians are. They smash through the Persian left flank, absolutely destroying it. In the center, it's pretty even. You've got the Greek phalanx fighting each other here. But on Alexander's left, it's not even at all. The Persians are really predominating. Parmenio is struggling to hold here. And so the battle line has shifted on an arc, as you can see here, with Alexander taking the lead here, even in the middle, and he's actually losing here. So this is the crucial stage in the battle. Now, what Alexander can do is he can see Darius. He can actually see Darius. If he can get to Darius, he believes, then the battle will end, because Darius, taking out the head of the snake, so to speak, if he can get to him, then surely he'll be victorious. And so Alexander is willing to leave the Greeks here and Parmenio essentially unattached to him. He's willing just to go hard for Darius and try to swing the battle that way. So this is a crucial stage in the battle. Whatever happens next will decide how this battle is going to fold out. And what happens is that Darius flees. He sees Alexander coming for him, and his 10,000 immortals are ranged around him, but they're getting massacred by Alexander's men because the Persian infantry can't hold them back. And so Darius, he turns and flees, and he scampers from the battlefield. The defining moment of the battle is Darius here fleeing as he does. And what this means is that all the Persians completely lose heart. The Greeks who are fighting the Macedonians here, there goes the guy who's about to pay us, or he's gone, hasn't he? He's gone. They essentially give up, they lose heart, and they start to retreat as well. And Alexander's able to sweep around and come behind the heavy cavalry and allow Parmenio a bit of breathing space, and between the two of them they can crush the cavalry. And so that's the Battle of Issus, completely defined by Darius fleeing, so he wouldn't be killed, and Alexander sweeping around and helping Parmenio on the left. Alexander was hugely victorious. Now there is this, originally it was a mosaic depicting the Battle of Issus and Alexander and Darius. It's a mosaic from the House of the Faun in Pompeii. And I would like, in our next screencast, just to have a closer look at this, because it does tell us a lot about the battle and how it was perceived at the time. So there we go. It's the Battle of Issus, a huge victory for Alexander. We'll talk about this mosaic and the outcomes of the Battle of Issus in the next screencast. Ka kite.